As the debate over how to reform healthcare in America rages on, one of the biggest factors in the discussion is the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. The United States spends more than any other country on these medicines. And despite what the industry tells you, it's not because we're sicker than any other country. Do most Americans know that Medicare isn't allowed to negotiate the prices of these drugs? And if they do, are they aware of why that's the case? Luckily, there's a new documentary film called Drugs that explains just how devastatingly greedy the pharmaceutical industry is and how they've successfully corrupted our elected officials to help them increase their profits.
Side effects include headache, flushing, upset stomach, and abnormal vision.
Where do drug prices come from? It's whatever the companies want, whatever they feel the traffic will bear.
Trouble with breathing, skin rashes.
This is an industry-wide problem of price gouging sick and dying Americans.
They're in it to make money.
Let's not forget, the drug industry is the most profitable industry in America. No other industry is even close.
Bruising, pain, numbness.
Everything we were to do was about making Wall Street happy.
All the way over! I wonder if you would do anything differently.
I probably would have raised the price higher.
Here to talk about this documentary is filmmaker Jonathan Marshall Thompson, who covered quite a bit of ground with this film. You touched on everyone. You talked about Mylan Pharmaceuticals. You talked about what was going on with Martin Shkreli and how he increased the price of an incredibly important drug for AIDS patients. And I give you a lot of credit because it's difficult to cover all those different issues and also be compelling. I mean, there was a lot going on. But tell me why you decided to focus your efforts on this particular issue.
I think that it's such a dense and complicated topic, and yet it affects everybody's lives, right? And I think that gets people in a position where they just don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, then it's hard to even have an opinion on it, right? So I said, well, it's once you really dive into it, it's amazing the system that the pharmaceutical companies has set up and how bad of a deal we're getting. So I said to myself, well, if we can really break this down bite size and make it entertaining for people that aren't necessarily hardcore activists, for normal people to understand and to be educated, then you're going to have an opinion. You're going to be active at that point because it's just incredibly rigged, really.
It is incredibly rigged, and we're gonna get to the details of that in just a second. One of the things that stood out to me, though, was you had a few people in the film who shared their story of getting sick and not having the resources necessary to pay for these life-saving drugs. Two of them actually died while you were creating this film. And it was hard for me to watch that, to see that they were such fighters trying to do the right thing and get the word out about what's happening with the pharmaceutical industry. And I mean, our system is so rigged that we're too late for them. They lost their lives as a result of what's going on.
Right.
And when it came to the Affordable Care Act, there was a lot of fear mongering about so-called death panels.
Sure.
But I mean, people are dying all around us because of the system we currently have.
Yeah, I mean, halfway through production, honestly, for a lot of it, we were really focusing on, the facts and the education side of it. But after talking with some of these people, like going to their houses, spending time with them, these people have kids, they have moms and dads, aunts, uncles. And then you really realize, how much of an impact this has on people. Like moms who can't afford medication for their own child, and with my parents getting older and needing medication, it's like it became a really important thing for us to get a human element in the film to remind people, this could be your mom, this could be your dad, this could be your son, your daughter. And, I mean, like people, I literally did an interview, and later on she was right next to me and we were doing the interview of her friend, and then all of a sudden she started seizing up. I helped carry her to her bed, called the ambulance, and on my way to the airport to the next interview, they called and said she had died.
That's devastating.
And her husband, seeing him, crying, and that was a couple that had to have a divorce. So that they could, so they could afford the medication to qualify for the benefits.
Because her husband allegedly made too much money to qualify for any type of government program to help her afford the medication. I mean, it was such a devastating story. But when we look at the issue of affordability in the pharmaceutical market here in the United States, there's a lot of talking points, many excuses that you hear from the industry, and a lot of those excuses have to do with research and development. So the big argument is, well, you know, our scientists have spent a lot of money developing these drugs. We spent a lot of resources doing it. We need to recoup what we have spent on developing these medications. But that's really not what's going on. So can you talk to me a little bit about the research development and also compare that to what's really being spent on marketing?
Correct. The problem is that it's not transparent, right? We don't really know how much they spend on research and development. That's purposeful so that we don't know. I mean, that's like their main tool, is to keep people in the dark. But what we do know is that they spend an overwhelming amount of money on marketing, right? On these commercials that everybody sees. The problem with that is that it's completely unnecessary, because if you need medication, you go to your doctor who's educated, who's a professional, and they say, you need X, Y, and Z drug, or whatever it is. Not me, who has nothing, I don't know anything about medicine, sees a commercial who's saying, you need this, you need this, you need this. So it's just, the marketing side is a no-brainer. In terms of, it's just completely unnecessary. You know, it does nothing other than to just
make us all
judgment.
think we're sick and we need to, you know, take a pill to solve something that probably doesn't even really exist in our lives.
Correct.
And so marketing wasn't always this prevalent. Pharmaceutical marketing wasn't. And so you touch on when the change happened in your film, but can you just talk about it a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, it really changed when, well, first of all, the United States and New Zealand are the only countries that allow direct-to-consumer marketing, which is, I think, really surprising, you know, to people. You know, when you live in the United States, you just assume that that's just everybody has that,
right?
And not true. But really, it came with President Clinton, who basically allowed these pharmaceutical companies to start marketing. Before that, they were basically limited to print ads and whatnot. So now everything is, you know, ask your doctor, ask your doctor, ask your doctor.
One other thing I wanted to just quickly touch on was the price gouging. So price gouging by the pharmaceutical industry has been going on for a long time now, but it appears that no one was really paying attention to it until Martin Shkreli came along and he increased the price of a drug that he didn't develop, his researchers didn't develop, his pharmaceutical company didn't develop. He just bought the rights to that pharmaceutical drug and then increased the price to nearly $800. The pill was around $50. I'm, you know, rounding for our audience, but now all of a sudden people are paying attention to what's happening with the pharmaceutical companies and how they're increasing the prices, and so they have no problem with people getting sick and finding these drugs too expensive to pay for, right? They have no problem with people either dying because they don't have access to these drugs or going bankrupt because they've had to, you know, spend everything and anything they have in getting these drugs. But what about the CEOs of these pharmaceutical companies? How are they doing? Because the way that they talk about research and development, it seems like these pharmaceutical companies are really struggling. You know, these CEOs, they're really doing God's work here in trying to develop these important drugs. But what's really going on behind the scenes? How are they getting paid?
Well, I mean, that's a really complicated topic that we actually talk about a lot in the film. You know, it has to do with really, I mean, yes, they have their large salaries, but they also cash in on their stocks, you know, which is, you know, I think a really complicated and dense topic. But basically, by them driving up their cost, buying their stocks back, and then cashing in later, you know, I think Gilead's a prime example of doing this. Yeah, your salary is $18 million, but by the time you get your stocks, you're making like $200+ million a year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which you can only imagine on what that money could be used for good. And you know, they clearly, as you would expect them to do, talk to their employees and everybody to say, well, we are doing this amazing work. We're doing this amazing work. But you know, I think I make it a point in the film too, though, to say that yes, the pharmaceutical companies are at fault, but we really got to push, I think, heavily on our the people that are supposed to take care of us in government.
Exactly.
You know, our
Exactly.
Congress and everything. It's like, that's your job. And
the way you do that is by getting the money out. These politicians have been corrupted by the very corporate interests that you cover quite a bit in your documentary film. Please check it out, guys. It was a fantastic film. I really enjoyed watching it. It's called Drugs. And thank you to filmmaker Jonathan Marshall Thompson for coming in and talking to us a little bit about it.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Did you know that TYT Network is now available on YouTube's new streaming platform, YouTube TV? Get access to full TYT episodes and exclusive shows by signing up for YouTube TV today. All new subscribers get a 7-day free trial, so head over to youtube.tv and search for the TYT Network channel.